Your city repaves the same pothole-covered street every 3 years. Roman slaves built roads with Bronze Age tools that still exist today. Here's the disturbing part. We know exactly how they did it, and there's a shocking reason why governments refuse to copy them. Roman legions were unstoppable. On solid ground, these guys could march 25 miles in a single day, fully loaded. Armor, weapons, supplies, the whole kit. But throw some mud into the equation, maybe a bit of rain, that speed gets cut in half, sometimes worse. And here's the thing nobody talks about. Conquering territory is actually the easy part. Holding it, that's where empires live or die. Picture a Roman general sitting in newly captured land, feeling pretty good about himself. Then news arrives. Enemy forces spotted near Rome. He needs to get his army back home. Fast. Except there's no road, just dirt paths that turn into soup when it rains. One single rainstorm could strand an entire army. Supply wagons stuck axle deep in muck, horses exhausted, soldiers going hungry because food shipments are delayed by weeks. Military messengers had it even worse. These men carried information that could save or doom entire provinces, and they needed to reach distant frontiers in days, not whenever the weather decided to cooperate. Tax collectors, merchants, government officials, they all needed reliable paths too. You can't run an empire through letters that take 3 months to arrive. So in 312 BC, Rome did something brilliant. They built the Appian Way, the first major Roman road constructed specifically to move troops south during a war with the Samnites. Not for trade, not for travel convenience, for war. And it worked so well that Roman leaders had a realization that would shape the next 1,000 years. Roads weren't just nice to have. They were the actual skeleton holding the empire together. But building a road is one thing. Building one that lasts 2,000 years? That required something most people have never heard of. Surveyors who could see through mountains. Now here's where things get interesting. Roman surveyors were called grammatici. Fancy name for guys who basically used a wooden cross with some strings and weights hanging off it. That's it. No GPS, no satellites, no lasers, just wood, string, and an obsession with straight lines. And obsessed they were. These men would rather cut through a hill than go around it. Why? Because every curve added thousands of extra footsteps for soldiers marching hundreds of miles. Multiply that by a legion of 5,000 men, and suddenly that shortcut around the hill costs you weeks of extra fatigue. The process started simple. Surveyors walked the entire proposed route first, hammering wooden stakes into the ground every 100 feet. My knees hurt just thinking about it. But here's what separates them from your average guy with a hammer. When mountains blocked the path, engineers actually calculated whether digging a tunnel would be faster than building around. Sometimes the tunnel won. They'd literally carve through solid rock rather than add a few curves. The road from Rome to Brindisi, 350 miles with barely any turns. It crosses rivers, climbs ridges, cuts through valleys, all while staying almost perfectly straight. Makes you wonder how they pulled it off, right? Well, surveying teams weren't just random workers. They included former soldiers who'd spent years marching across terrible terrain. These guys knew exactly which slopes would exhaust troops, which ground would destroy wagon wheels, which routes looked easy but would turn into nightmares during rainy season. They weren't guessing. They were drawing on decades of painful experience. So now you've got your perfectly straight path mapped out. Stakes in the ground, route planned, but a line of wooden sticks isn't a road. To build something that lasts millennia, you need to start digging. Now here's where the real work begins. Roman road crews didn't just scratch the surface and call it a day. They dug trenches 3 to 6 feet deep. That's waist high on most people, sometimes deeper than a grown man's chest. Why so extreme? Because topsoil is basically garbage for building. It's full of roots, dead leaves, worms, and organic material that rots over time. And when stuff rots, it shrinks. When it shrinks, your fancy road sinks, then cracks, then falls apart. Romans wanted none of that, so they excavated everything soft until they hit something solid. Workers hauled out dirt by the basketful, load after load, probably cursing in Latin the whole time. On the Via Appia alone, crews reportedly removed enough earth to fill 50,000 modern dump trucks, and they did it with shovels and determination. The trench width depended on how important the road was. Major military highways got 15 to 20 feet wide. Local roads connecting small towns? Maybe 8 feet. Makes sense, right? You don't build an 8-lane interstate to a village of 40 people. Here's what really mattered, though. Hitting bedrock was like winning the ancient lottery. When workers struck solid stone at the bottom, engineers knew that section would stand forever. No settling, no shifting, just rock-solid permanence. But what about swamps? Marshes? Ground so soft you'd lose a sandal just standing there. They drove wooden pilings deep into the muck, dozens of them, sometimes hundreds, creating an artificial foundation where nature refused to provide one. And that excavated dirt didn't go to waste either. Crews piled it along both edges, building raised embankments that would later help with drainage. Speaking of which, that empty trench needed filling. And the first layer going in? Absolute boulders. Now here's where Roman engineering gets serious. The bottom layer of every road used stones roughly the size of footballs, sometimes bigger. We're talking rocks that weigh 50, 60, even 100 pounds each. Workers placed these by hand, one by one, fitting them together like a giant puzzle without any mortar holding them in place. Sounds unstable, right? Actually, it's genius. See, when you lock big irregular stones together, they can't shift sideways. The weight of everything above pushes them tighter against each other. Try pulling one out? Good luck. The surrounding stones grip it from every angle. But here's the clever bit. Those tiny gaps between stones, they let water drain straight through. Water hits the surface, trickles down through the layers, and escapes out the bottom. No pooling, no freezing, no damage. This foundation layer alone ran 12 to 18 inches thick. Let that sink in. Just the bottom layer was deeper than most modern roads are in total. Your average asphalt street? Maybe 4 inches of material sitting on compressed dirt. Romans buried 1.5 feet of boulders before they even started on the good stuff, and the weight of all that stone did something unexpected. It compressed the earth beneath it. Basically, the road pre-settled itself before a single wagon rolled across. I've seen modern driveways crack within 3 years because contractors skipped proper foundations. Meanwhile, Roman roads built on this boulder base haven't budged in 2,000 years. The Romans understood something we keep forgetting. A road is only as strong as what sits beneath it. You could pave the surface with solid gold, and it wouldn't matter if the foundation was garbage. Speaking of what comes next, that's where things get really interesting. Here's where Roman engineering gets genuinely weird. The second layer wasn't just rocks stacked on rocks, it was nature's concrete. And honestly, it puts our modern stuff to shame. Workers mixed fist-sized stones with lime mortar. Nothing fancy there, but the secret ingredient was volcanic ash called pozzolana. This stuff came from areas around Mount Vesuvius and other volcanic regions. When you combine lime with pozzolana, something strange happens. A chemical reaction kicks in. The whole mixture hardens into one solid mass. Now, here's the kicker. Portland cement, the stuff we use today, starts weakening after about 50 years. Roman concrete, it actually gets stronger over time. Scientists studied this for decades trying to figure out why. Turns out the volcanic ash keeps reacting with moisture and seawater for centuries. The material literally heals itself. My grandfather used to say, they don't make them like they used to. Turns out he was right, annoyingly right. This rudous layer measured 9 to 12 inches thick. That's a lot of material. But Romans weren't done after just pouring it. Workers grabbed heavy wooden rams and pounded the mixture. For days, sometimes weeks on a single section, they kept pounding until it stopped settling even a little bit. Imagine doing that job in the Italian summer heat. No thanks. The real genius, though, small cracks weren't a problem. Moisture seeping into tiny gaps would reactivate the lime and seal everything back up. Self-healing roads. 2,000 years before we started bragging about smart materials. Builders near Vesuvius basically hit the jackpot. Endless volcanic material meant their roads turned out especially durable. But here's the thing. Even the best concrete needs something smooth on top. And the next layer did something clever with garbage. Here's the thing about the first 2 layers. They were rough, intentionally rough. You couldn't roll a cart smoothly over fist-sized rocks held together with volcanic cement. That's where layer 3 came in. The nucleus was basically Roman smoothing paste. Workers mixed gravel or crushed stones with cement until it formed something close to what we'd recognize as concrete today. Then they spread it 9 to 12 inches thick across the entire road surface. But spreading wasn't enough. Crews compacted this layer while it was still wet. They pounded it with wooden rams, over and over, sometimes for days straight. Why? Because air pockets are road killers. One tiny void, and you've got a weak spot that'll crack under the first heavy wagon. And here's where Roman engineers showed their genius. They didn't make this layer flat. They shaped it higher in the center, creating what's called a crown. The slope was subtle, maybe 2 or 3%. You'd barely notice walking on it. But water noticed. Rainwater hit the surface and immediately started flowing toward the edges. No puddles forming in the middle. No standing water seeping into cracks. My grandfather used to say the difference between good work and great work is what nobody sees. The nucleus was exactly that. Invisible brilliance. Some crews got creative with their materials too. Near demolished buildings, workers would toss broken pottery and brick fragments into the mix. Free materials, less waste, same strength. Romans basically invented construction recycling 2,000 years before we thought we were clever for doing it. The fancy paving stones everyone admires, they sat on top of this layer. But wagon wheels and horse hooves, they were really pressing against the nucleus. Those famous surface stones, though, they had their own engineering secrets. Now we get to the part everyone actually sees. The summa crusta, the top layer. Those beautiful paving stones that tourists still photograph 2,000 years later. These weren't just any rocks thrown on top. Each stone weighed between 100 and 300 pounds. Masons cut them into irregular polygon shapes, then fitted them together like the world's heaviest jigsaw puzzle. And here's what most people get wrong. They assume uniform rectangular blocks would work better, neater, more organized. But Roman engineers knew something clever. Rectangular blocks create straight lines across the road. Those lines become highways for cracks. One break spreads to the next stone, then the next, until the whole section fails. Polygons don't have that problem. Each irregular shape locks against its neighbors from multiple angles. A crack hits one stone and stops dead. The fitting process bordered on obsessive. Stonemasons shaped each block to match its neighbors with gaps no wider than a knife blade. My grandmother's china cabinet isn't organized this precisely. These guys were fitting 300-pound rocks. But the real genius, only 1/3 of each stone sat above ground. 2/3 of that mass was buried beneath the surface. These stones weren't sitting on the road, they were planted in it, like teeth in a jaw. Good luck kicking those loose. Walk the Via Appia today, and you'll notice something strange. Groove marks worn into stones by iron-rimmed wagon wheels. Centuries of traffic literally carved the rock. The stones wore down before they shifted. Oh, and that surface texture? Deliberately rough. Horses and oxen needed traction, especially in rain. Smooth stones meant dead animals. Smart design, quality materials, obsessive craftsmanship, but even perfect stones fail without one critical system. The part Romans understood better than anyone. Here's the thing about building a perfect road. You can nail every layer, use the best stones, and mix concrete that would make modern engineers jealous. None of it matters if water gets in. Water is the silent killer of roads. It seeps into tiny cracks, freezes, expands, and suddenly that hairline fracture becomes a pothole. Romans knew this, and they obsessed over it. Every major Roman road had ditches running along both sides. Not optional, not decorative. These channels caught every drop of runoff and carried it away from the road surface. Property owners who blocked these ditches faced fines so heavy they'd make your mortgage payment look like pocket change. But ditches alone weren't enough. Remember that crowned surface from the nucleus layer? That slight bump in the middle? It created a 2 to 3% slope from center to edge. Doesn't sound like much, right? Well, it's enough gradient to keep water moving without making travelers feel like they're walking on a tilted floor. The real genius showed up at river crossings. Instead of just building the road over streams and hoping for the best, engineers constructed stone culverts underneath. Water flowed through these channels while the road surface stayed bone dry above. Some sections even had underground drainage channels that intercepted groundwater before it could reach the foundation layers. My basement floods when it rains hard. These guys were solving water problems 2,000 years ago that I still can't figure out today. The whole system worked together. Crowned surface pushes water to edges. Ditches catch it. culverts handle crossings. Underground channels stop groundwater from rising. Water never sat long enough to freeze, never pooled long enough to seep down. Of course, the best drainage system in the world means nothing without people to maintain it. Rome didn't just build roads and walk away. That would be insane. They created an entire system to keep them perfect. Permanent repair crews lived every 10 to 15 miles along major highways. Not visited, lived. These guys woke up each morning with one job: walk their section, find problems, fix them immediately. A loose stone today becomes a pothole next month. They knew this, but here's where it gets interesting. Wealthy citizens called curatores viarum were assigned specific roads, and they were personally accountable for the condition. Your road falls apart? Everyone knows your name is on it. Talk about motivation. These maintenance teams stockpiled everything they needed: replacement stones, gravel, lime, all sitting in storage facilities along the route. When damage happened, repairs started within hours, not weeks of bureaucratic approvals. Hours. Now, property owners along the roads had legal obligations too. You owned land next to a highway, you maintained that section, or you paid taxes so government crews would do it instead. No excuses, no exceptions. The milestone markers weren't just for navigation either. They included inscriptions identifying exactly who built that section. Centuries later, people could still point at a road and say, Marcus Crassus built this, and look, it's still holding up. Or more embarrassingly, this section is garbage, and we all know whose fault that is. Here's the number that shocked me. Rome spent an estimated 2 to 3% of total government revenue on road maintenance alone. Modern governments, they barely hit 1%, and they're constantly playing catch-up. All this effort kept 250,000 miles functional for centuries, but maintenance only works if nothing catastrophic happens. What about roads that survived earthquakes, invasions, and literal neglect for 1,000 years? Those still exist today. Here's the thing, nobody tells you about Roman roads. You can still walk on them. I'm not talking about museum exhibits behind glass. I mean actual roads, outside, with your own feet. The Via Appia near Rome, tourists stroll on those original paving stones every single day. Look closely, and you'll spot wheel ruts carved by ancient carts. 2,000 years of groceries, soldiers, and probably some really lost tourists. Makes you feel weird, right? Standing where Julius Caesar's sandals might have touched. Then there's the Fosse Way in England. The modern A46 highway follows it for nearly 200 miles. Drivers cruise along at 60 miles per hour, completely unaware they're basically carpooling with Roman ghosts. But here's what really gets me. In Portugal, a Roman bridge at Chaves still carries actual vehicle traffic. Cars, trucks, delivery vans full of who knows what after 2 millennia. Meanwhile, my local bridge got temporarily closed for repairs 3 years ago. Parts of the Via Egnatia crossing Greece and Albania worked as functioning roads until the 1900s. Nobody bothered paving over them because, honestly, why would you? They weren't broken. And the street grids of London, Paris, Vienna, still following Roman alignments. Those cities grew around roads that emperors planned. Spanish archaeologists recently uncovered a Roman road buried under just 8 inches of soil, perfectly preserved. The drainage still worked after 20 centuries underground. That drainage detail matters more than you'd think. Because while these ancient highways have survived wars, earthquakes, and countless governments, modern roads can barely handle one bad winter. So what exactly are we doing wrong today? Turns out almost everything. And the comparison is honestly embarrassing. Here's where it gets frustrating. Most American roads are designed to last 20 to 30 years. That's it. Roman engineers planned for centuries. They used 3 times more material per mile than we consider necessary today. And we wonder why our highways fall apart. Modern asphalt contains petroleum products that become brittle and crack within a decade. Temperature swings make it worse. Hot summer, cold winter, repeat. Your road develops wrinkles faster than my uncle at a family reunion. But the real problem runs deeper, literally. Today's roads often skip deep foundation trenches entirely. Contractors lay asphalt directly over compacted dirt that shifts with moisture changes. Remember those 6-foot trenches Romans dug? Modern crews sometimes excavate just a few inches. America spends approximately $130 billion annually repairing roads. Let that sink in. Much of that money fixes the same potholes repeatedly. I've watched my city patch the same stretch of highway 3 times in 2 years. The Romans would have been horrified, or laughing, probably both. The pressure to complete projects quickly and cheaply means modern contractors choose speed over durability every time. Lowest bidder wins. And you know what they say about getting what you pay for. Roman roads were overbuilt by modern standards, way overbuilt. They used materials we'd call wasteful, multiple layers, massive stones, drainage systems that actually worked. Wasteful, sure, except those roads still exist. Meanwhile, that highway exit you take to work, it'll need resurfacing before your car loan gets paid off. Makes you wonder if cheaper really means cheaper. The thing is, modern engineers aren't stupid. Some have actually started studying Roman techniques, and what they're discovering in those ancient road cores might change everything. Here's where things get interesting for us today. Scientists recently cracked open chunks of Roman concrete pulled from ancient harbors. What they found? The stuff is still getting stronger, 2,000 years later, and it hasn't peaked yet. Meanwhile, my driveway started crumbling after 6 winters. 6! The secret is volcanic ash mixed with seawater. When those two meet inside Roman concrete, they create new minerals that keep growing and filling tiny cracks. It's basically self-healing infrastructure. We're out here patching potholes every spring, and the Romans built roads that fix themselves while everyone sleeps. Modern engineers are finally paying attention. Teams from MIT and other universities have started analyzing Roman road cores, trying to figure out why their lime mortar laughs at our Portland cement. Turns out our cement hardens fast but stays brittle. Roman cement hardens slow but gets tougher with age. Patience, apparently, makes better roads. And some people are actually using these lessons. New projects in Europe are experimenting with deeper foundations and Roman-inspired self-healing concrete formulas. Will it catch on everywhere? Probably not. Building for centuries doesn't win elections. Quick ribbon-cutting ceremonies do. But here's the real takeaway. The Romans didn't have secret technology. No magic formulas, no ancient aliens helping out. They just refused to cut corners. They used more material than seemed necessary. They built foundations deeper than anyone thought required. They planned for grandchildren they'd never meet. Every pothole you dodge tomorrow morning is proof that we forgot something important. Cheap now costs more later. Always has. 2,000 years of evidence sits right under our feet. We drive over it, walk across it, and somehow still think 20-year roads are good enough. The Romans knew better. Maybe it's time we remembered.